Whenever graduates from Mars Hill College from the last half of the 20th century come back to campus, they always ask 3 questions. How's Mr. Sams? How's Coach Hart? And tell me about Dr. Jolley. Well, we have Dr. Jolley right here. And so now we can tell people how you are, Harley. And is it okay for me to say that in this day in August of 2008 that you have celebrated your 88th birthday?
Celebrated in Alaska.
In Alaska?
Yes.
So you're still traveling?
Oh, I have no intention of it. I told the 2 cents, okay, Alaska for 88, Australia for 90.
Great.
That worked.
That's wonderful. You're keeping it going. You set a standard for all of us.
It has to go. Yeah.
Wonderful. I wanted to ask you, speaking about traveling, obviously everybody knows that your field has been history, and you've been in some exotic places in your lifetime. I wanted to ask you how on earth it was, out of all the places you've been, how did you first find Mars Hill College?
By hitchhiking from Knoxville. My mentor in Appalachian State got me a teaching position or a scholarship at University of Tennessee.
Right.
And he found out there was a job opening in Mars Hill.
I see.
He said, now Harley, when you go there, make sure you say doctor, 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 doctor regularly and all that. And when you get a chance, put in a plug for Appalachian. Well, I rode the bus as far as Asheville. No bus convenience, so I hitchhiked in for the interview.
You came out. You actually hit. That's wonderful. Did you know? Did you have an interview set up with Dr. Blackwell at that point?
Dr. Blackwell and Dean Lee.
Dean Lee, right. Well, you mentioned Appalachian. I know you did your undergraduate work there. Where were you born? How did you get to Appalachian?
I got there the hard way, absolutely. I was born in Caldwell County.
Right.
1920. Local high school, local elementary school and high school, and then wound up in the military. I had no jobs. There was no jobs available. I graduated in 1937, Kings Creek High School. No jobs basically available. So I wound up in the Civilian Conservation Corps first. And from that went into the military, wound up in a place called Honolulu,
yes,
Hawaii, and had about a year plus there when the Japanese visited us in so-called Pearl Harbor. And
you were there on that day, and
I was there. I had the good fortune to be in a 3-story concrete building. I was in the bottom story.
You were very fortunate.
I've been fortunate in so many ways all my life, Robert. Yes.
And you would have been just barely. You weren't even 20 yet.
I was born in 20.
That's right. You're 21 then, I guess, when it happened. Were there any inklings that you all had that attack was?
Nothing. No, nothing. Of course, the higher ups had been doing what they were supposed to do. They'd been warned of the possibility.
Right.
And what they did, they lined up their ships and the airplanes in such a manner that they could be surrounded and protected as a group against sabotage. Made it very simple for the Japanese to bring down the road.
And they did.
And they did.
And they did. Of course, you were there right in the middle of all that. What was it like to be in the middle of something so catastrophic? Was there chaos, or was there?
It was absolute chaos. Every way you turn, the most frightful night in my entire world life for 88 years was that night. We were given riot guns placed out on the perimeter of Hickam Field, the Air Force there, and told to shoot anything that moved. We did. And you did.
And you had no way of knowing how many people were there or where they were coming from?
If we were being invaded or if the aerial attack was the only thing there, we had no way of knowing.
Right.
It was a long night, a miserable night, and a frightful night.
That's right. When you waked up in the morning the next day, had the attacks happened only at one time? Were they continuing through the night, or had they just?
No, there were no attacks at night. They were an all daylight.
An all daylight.
What we were doing out there was the typical frightened boys on the front line, shooting at anything that moved and wondering, did I hit it?
Right. And how long after the attack were you actually at Pearl Harbor?
I was there about 3 months. Came back as an aerial aviation cadet. That got me out of Honolulu into the States. Had a great time as a cadet. My schools, no problem in the schooling of it, but in flying, acrobatics made me sick or no, so I washed out.
Ah, interesting.
I mean, miserable, see, Robert, miserable.
Miserable.
That's, you know, I wasn't by myself.
Well,
Boys like that.
Well, yeah, you were just kids, you know,
we
in
were
those days.
kids. That's what the Air Force was, you know.
Right. So at some point, though, I know that you ended up in Europe. What was the sequence to get you to Europe?
I was stationed in Yuma, Arizona, for about a year plus. Very, very boring indeed. And I thought, well, this is not going to get any better. So I applied for service overseas and got Europe. And I got to Europe about 2 weeks after D-Day. So I was about two weeks behind the Patton Army as they moved into
Right.
Europe. England into France, France into Belgium, back to France, that territory. Quite a world. Thankfully, I had a fairly good command of French, and my high school teacher was a great teacher, so I quite often was a translator.
What a juxtaposition from Pearl Harbor, the Japanese, to France.
To France.
What a
Beautiful girls.
Yes, beautiful girls. Were you there in Europe or in France very long?
I was there from 44 through I was there from VE Day.
Okay. So actually then when the war was over, you came back to the United States and almost immediately went to college then.
When the war was ending, when VE Day came, the Army had already listed a series of, had devised a system of points. So many points for so many days and so forth, how much you service.
Right.
I was well established on the point, but I had what's called 109 points, which meant I would be the first to come home. So they sent me back home on furlough, but in my pocket was orders to report for duty for invasion in Japan.
Oh, golly.
While I was home, Japan was bombed, Japan surrendered. I wired the commanding officer, please send me my discharge.
So that was it.
How crazy.
Gosh, the timing was just perfect then.
Oh, how crazy can you
In crazy. In the years, in the intervening years, because you had those very intense experiences in Pearl Harbor and in France, have you gone back to those places to visit?
No, I have. I made political arrangements for my congressman to send my family over.
Right.
And they had a great tour. We're hosted by Hickam officials and had a marvelous tour where I had been.
Right.
And Stuart had been back, of course, several times. But I have no real desire to
No,
go back.
to go back.
I'd like to go back to France,
Yes.
that sort of thing. And I'm looking at that for a possibility.
Great. Where were you in France?
I started at the Normandy Beach.
Yes.
All the way up into Paris. I've had 3 great weekends in Paris, that sort of thing. Then finally on up to the large city called Nancy, France,
Yes.
which is right on the German border, and that's where I was stationed when the war ended. Yeah.
Those were great places to be, as far as the cities that people would want to visit in France.
Right.
Not a fun time to be there in the war, of
But
course.
let me tell a story that has interest for me, and I hope for my listeners. I was walking down the street of Nancy early one morning on April the 12th. I saw a very old senior citizen Frenchman walking down the street, just tears running down his cheek. I touched him and I said, "Pourquoi?" Why? He said, "Il est mort. He's dead." I said, "Qui? Who?" He said, "FDR." And that's how I learned about Mr. President's death.
From a Frenchman on the street.
Straight crying.
Interesting.
It's amazing.
Interesting.
That's history for you.
That is history, and that's a wonderful history. I had an occasion to meet Marcel Marceau several years ago, and he was a child during this period in the very same places you're talking about. And he said that for him, he would always love the United States because the United States had come in and had saved France. And he says often today people forget
No, they forgot very quickly.
very quickly,
Very quickly.
you know. So you had a chance to observe. Did you feel that the French, when you were there, were they appreciative that the United States had come in to help France? Did you get a sense of that?
They were delighted we were there and were very kind to us. But when the Battle of Bulge stopped, they boarded all windows, they left the streets, and they were not speaking to us because they feared that the Germans were going to win the Battle of Bulge and come back and shoot them for collaborating. But when the Battle of Bulge was over, the windows opened, the streets were free, and we were back in business.
And they were back in
Oh,
it.
Lord.
Interesting.
C'est la vie.
C'est la vie. And probably for them that was a very real method of survival. They had to think about survival.
Let me tell Chrissy, the ugliest thing I've ever seen in my life in the way of womanhood in France when the war was over, the local French rounded up the collaborateurs who had collaborated with the German and shaved their heads and marched them down the street. You know, ugly Robert. That was Robert Ugly. Oh,
I'm sure.
Gosh, indeed. That's history.
What did they do with those collaborators?
They shaved their heads and turned them loose.
Oh, they let them go.
They were shamed
Yes.
enough that nobody wanted anything to do with them.
Right. Has anybody in your history, since you were one of the few people that we would know locally who was at Pearl Harbor, for example, has anybody come back and when doing history books and documentaries, talk to you about your time in the war? Has that happened?
Not a great deal. I've been interviewed a couple of times, but not of any stature, any depth.
Okay. I was so fascinated when I was doing some research about you to discover that you had this very quick, almost immediate, after you got out of Appalachian and you did your master's in Tennessee, that there was an immediate, you came here immediately. There was no time in between.
Again, I had good mentors who knew what was going on academically.
Yes.
And knew Mars Hill very, very well, and knew about the vacancy and knew the basic buttons to push to get me in the door.
Right.
So I was delighted to have a job.
Tell me about Dr. Blackwell. You know, we all knew him, of course, but what was he like when you first met him?
Charming, charming, charming. He was a very short fellow, but charming, and always so extremely polite.
Yeah.
So very polite. For years, I taught in the classroom right immediately adjacent to his office, so I taught him a lot of history.
He heard a lot, huh? There was no way he could know you were not doing a good job. When you came to the campus, I asked this question to somebody else, was there a sense of culture shock coming here because it was so small and isolated?
No, not at all. Remember, I came out of rural Colorado
Yes.
County.
So this was not unusual to you?
Coming out of Knoxville, of course, it was a change of pace.
Right.
But I was looking for a job, not the culture shock.
Okay, let me ask you this. We know you, of course, through your work in these wonderful things that relate not only to Appalachia, but to the region. What was your focus in history when you were studying? What kind of history were you planning to teach? What was your focus there?
I began at Appalachian as a math major, had a wonderful math teacher, and then entered a class from a former Navy man who just fresh out of the Navy, World War II as I was, and he was an absolutely out of this world outstanding professor. Every third word was a cuss word, but boy could he teach. Never a note, never reference note, chalk on the table, chalk on the board, and just such beautiful, beautiful lectures indeed. I became his study man. I became his aide.
Right.
And I observed how he did the thing. He'd come into the office before class, take out his notes and go through them and walk out the door. Notes behind him. Just marvelous.
It's on his head.
So I tried to emulate him and tried my best to be as good a teacher as he was. I never made it, but I enjoyed it.
Oh, you did make it. In fact, when I first came here to teach, one of the first things I heard was about I overheard some students talking about being in your history class, and they were talking to each other about how much fun it was that you had turned history into a vivid experience. And somebody was talking about, oh, he jumped up on the desk and he was, whatever the subject was, and then somebody else said, well, he was impersonating, I think it was Louis XVI, and we really knew who Louis XVI was by the time we got out of that class. When you came here, obviously the school was a junior college. What levels of history were required in those days for the students? Did they take world history and then?
Everybody was required to take what was called World Civilization. That was absolutely required for everybody. Indeed. And then most of them took an American history course. So those are two big substantials.
So, and you probably taught both.
Oh yes, no.
Everybody taught both. When the college in the 60s, when the college began to move to senior status, I know you went off to school and did your doctoral degree, but were you here when the transition occurred? In other words, were you here when the department was built, the history department was built? How did that happen? From the junior college to senior college status. How did you know what courses and so forth? How did that happen?
Again, we had any standard senior college catalog to go by.
Oh, you just looked at other schools.
Okay, we'll need this course, we'll need this course. We'll have to have a course in historiography. This is built in for history majors.
Right.
And we'll need a world survey course. we need some colonial. And I said, let me teach a Western history course. And so those are the ways they developed. Basically, as needed at the time, as we enlarged.
How soon was it after you got the department going that you began to think in terms of courses in Appalachian studies? Was that how soon?
That came much later.
Much later.
That came basically through the formation of the Appalachian Consortium, which I had found.
I was going to say, I knew that you had done that. Could we digress for a moment and talk about the consortium? I mean, we're a little bit out of sequence here, but I know the consortium was formed, was in the 70s, wasn't it?
The chancellor or president of East Tennessee State was Art DeRozier.
Right.
Arthur, working with Bill Clemens, president of Appalachian, and Craig Williams, the chancellor, the vice president. And we, Mars Hill, we sat down and devised a consortium which blossomed and grew and became very, very influential in our region for several years. I regret that it has died. It needs reviving.
Let me ask you about it. I was very much aware of it and the good work it was doing. I know you all had your consortium press, for example. Right. Am I not right in saying that part of the reason for its forming was that foundations who wanted to give money to colleges were getting duplicate requests, and the consortium helped them to...
We had much more power.
Yes, as a group.
Numerous agencies and units, varying from the Forest Service, Park Service, the junior college, the senior college, all those. And then, as we put it in one unit, we had a much better chance of getting support, and we did.
And you did. Why do you think it died, Harley?
Let me be honest, poor leadership.
Okay.
And I think total unawareness of what it was doing by the Appalachian State leadership. Okay. That's my frank opinion. I may be totally wrong.
Well, no,
that's what I think.
Well, and I suppose it's true with anything that is formed, that it depends so much on, as leadership changes, if other leaders pick up from other, you know.
It became very expensive for Appalachian. They hosted it. They provided a secretary and so forth. The business side of it. It was expensive, but nevertheless, the overall benefits far overshadowed those expenses.
I would think so. And the fact that they were the only state school in it at first, weren't they?
Right.
And of course, that's why they probably took, because they had state money that the smaller schools didn't have.
Leadership was good of it at the time. So
right.
Bill Clemens, Craig Williams, impossible beat. They were just dynamic. They had a sense of region.
And they had a vision too.
They had visions.
They really did have vision.
Really, really great. Craig Williams, a Kentucky boy. Bill Clemens, right out of Buncombe County over here, and they were very much aware of what their heritage was and wished to share it and enlarge it. Sure.
Right. Was there at the college here? I know the first time I heard about Mars Hill College was when I was in college, and my sense of it, based on the student who was a graduate talking about it, was that it was a small Baptist school in the mountains, and that it was very conservative and that sort of thing. And it seemed that the focus was on the Baptist heritage to the exclusion of other possibilities. Am I not correct in saying that the Appalachian Consortium indeed opened up the possibility that the school was looked at for its Appalachian heritage? Much broader.
Much broader indeed. And that was one of the benefits of the consortium itself, indeed. Yeah. And the ability to meet with other agencies on our campus and share with them, then go to their campus and share there and share our desires, our wishes, our vision, our hopes, our, hey, let's do this together. It made all the difference in the world.
I'm sure it did. Is there any move to get it back?
I hear underground movements that are very good. I just wish them good luck.
How much did Mars Hill contribute to the consortium as far as energy?
Mars Hill paid his fees, but his leadership couldn't grow.
And that would have been during the era of Dick Hoffman and Dr. Bentley.
Right.
They were very supportive of it.
They were well aware, well supported of it.
Yeah.
And very conscious of what it was they were supporting.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I hope, like you, that it will come back, because it was
an
awfully good thing.
Particularly when you look at the overall range of what it really was, not the miserable expense for one unit. You know?
Right. Right. Let me jump to another subject which relates to all of this. When and how did you first meet Betty Cornett?
Appalachian State is a marvelous place for matchmaking, as most colleges are. I came to Appalachian State fresh out of the military in 1945, September 1945.
Right.
I enrolled as enrollee, top enrollee, the last enrollee, number 500, and now they have something like 16,000. Can't just imagine that. But anyway,
it was Appalachian State Teachers College.
Appalachian State Teachers College at that time, and it was being flooded by the. As I came, right behind me came a whole flood of GIs eager to get an education.
Yeah.
It was quite a place to be. And the second semester, there enrolled a young lady who had left Marcy because she got sick here and went home up to West Jefferson, North Carolina. Decided she'd go back to school and attended. She's a music major, and Appalachia had a good music department, so she came to Appalachia. We both had a mutual friend. A friend who was a neighbor to me and wound up as a missionary up in Ashe County. And that friend told Betty about some boy named Harley-Jolley, and to watch out for him. In the evenings after class and so forth, we'd all go to the local gymnasium and chat and all that territory, and we began chatting. Next thing you know, we're hiking. Next thing you know, we're chatting about various friends. Next thing you know, well, we're riding bicycle together. Next thing you know, it's Christmas time. Oh, good, that's good. And that started off.
And that did it. Yeah. So you were already married then when you came here, or had
No. I left Appalachia. Betty was 1 year behind me.
Got it.
I graduated in 1948. She graduated in 1949. In 1949, I left. I was in the University of Tennessee for a master's degree.
Right.
And in the fall of 49, I graduated there with an MA and came here as a new rookie teacher.
And amazing.
And then she got a job teaching in Winston-Salem. And I told her where I was and what I was doing and so forth, and teased her about this being her old hometown country. And finally, on December 1949, as you remember, 'tis the season to be jolly. And I asked her if she'd be jolly. I said, yes, and she knew. So we got married on Christmas Eve.
You did? On Christmas Eve. Did you ever chafe that you had to get two gifts?
No problem. No problem. We both enjoyed the fact
Christmas.
This is double.
Double. How long after you were married now did the boys come along?
2 years.
2 years.
2 years. Ben came along, and 13 years later.
For Stuart.
Stuart was my PhD baby.
Yes.
Deliberate, absolutely deliberate and enjoying it.
Oh, that's wonderful. And Ben is Wachovia executive in Charlotte. Is that right?
He is senior vice president of Charlotte for human resources, and is a very, very highly respected young man and talented. We know that indeed. But he is. When came time of my retirement, he's the one who calculated. Where do I put how much money, how do I do this?
Oh, yes.
So I had a built-in assessment there.
That's wonderful to have all that kind of good free help.
Yes, sir.
That's great. And his son just, I believe, graduated from Queens University. Yeah, in Charlotte.
So I was the first, so far as I know, of my family to go to college. Now this is the third generation to go to college.
Right.
Which again,
yeah.
marvelous.
Well, they both went here too, didn't they, the boys?
Both got their freshmen, their Bachelor of Arts here.
Right. Where did you know that? Of course, we were talking about computers earlier. Did you have any clue what they would end up doing in their careers?
Oh no. When Stuart told me to go his man, I said, Stuart, and he said, Dad, that's what I want, and that's what he became. But Ben, his mama wanted him to be a doctor.
Right.
We finally got him into med school. The first year, top his class. Second year, top his class. Third year, top his class. Fourth year, Dad, this is not for me.
Goodness.
His mother about died. Honestly, she about died. But instead of just flat out leaving everything, he crossed the hall, picked up an MBA in Chapel Hill,
right,
and immediately hit the banking business. So with his medical background,
perfect.
First Union jumped on him, as you well know.
That's perfect.
And they've had a jewel ever since.
Incredible career. That must have been very difficult for both Betty and for him.
It was rough. He knew how much she wanted him to be a doctor, but he knew it was not for him. We don't know what changed his mind or what happened.
Right.
But anyway, he tells me frequently, I'm so glad.
It's great. Well, he's happy, and that's the important thing. That's the important.
That is the key.
How long before Betty came to teach at the college?
When we married, that was in '49, she came to Mars Hill and got a job teaching in Asheville. And she taught there a couple of years, then came here as assistant librarian. She went to Appalachian for a master's degree and had a professor named Harley Jolley as one of her teachers. Oh, that was a go. You remember my little morning quiz?
Yeah.
Well, from home in West Jefferson to the classroom in Boone, trying to find out what the questions would be. And her classmates would cooperate her and try to evoke what the question
Yes.
was. That was hilarious. Oh, absolutely hilarious.
Fun.
They gave me a rough time. We all enjoyed it. Had a great class.
I bet that was fun.
And then with her, she got her master's in history. Dean Lee, very critically assigned her to the history department.
Good.
Great.
So that was wonderful. You both were in the same department. Was it unusual at the college to have two faculty people in the same department?
Not necessarily.
I know that there were other, people with other
Right,
departments,
yeah.
but in the same department. What was it? Did Dr. Blackwell encourage you after you had been here for a while to go back for a doctorate, or was that your own idea?
It's my own, because I knew from experience in the academic world that the union card and the only union card was a PhD.
Yes.
Without it, I wouldn't have had a chance. Promotion would not have been there. Anything else would not have been there.
Right.
And it's the open doors.
You're right. You're absolutely right. Tell me, what was it about Florida State that attracted you to go there?
Free tuition.
Ah!
I applied for a scholarship, and one of the professors down there, the man of the head of the department, was from Chapel Hill originally.
Oh.
I taught at Chapel Hill, so he made sure I got the teaching assistant thing, and they finally wound up getting me a full scholarship. So all I had to do was go to school.
Just go to school.
Nice to have buddies.
That's great. Now, did Betty go with you, or did she stay here during?
She stayed here and paid the bills.
And so you commuted back and forth during that period. How long did it take you to do that doctorate?
I think 3 years.
That's probably
64, 69. Yeah.
Yes.
69, I had the degree in hand and all that, so I know that was taken.
So yes, right. You were here. Did you know Dr. Moore at all?
See, Robert, I saw the man. I saw him on campus with the celluloid collar and knew who he was. But by the time I was coming in, he was well gone on the way for retirement,
right, and
seldom seen on campus. So I never had the personal experience of meeting with him or chatting with him.
Mm-hmm. And his wife also, I think, was very, very important in business, the business office, here on campus. You were one of the few people who had the opportunity to know all the presidents in the 20th century. We've talked about this. It's amazing to me, that in that period.
Nice to be long-lived.
Well, it's wonderful, first of all, that you find presidents who stay that long. Right. Dan Lunsford said not long ago, he said that era is long gone. Nobody will do that anymore. Did you teach Max Lennon during the time he was here as a student? So you got to know him as a student.
Oh, yes.
And so you knew him.
And Dr. Lunsford also.
That's right. Dan spoke about your teaching him. He said he was terrified of what kind of exams you were going to give him.
He said that in public.
Yes, he has said that. I've heard him say that. What was it like? You were here then through essentially two major administrations, Dr. Blackwell and Dr. Bentley. What was the character? How were they different in feeling and way of doing things?
Dr. Blackwell basically was the administrator during the junior college portion. And as a junior college, we ranked extremely high nationwide.
Right.
Our graduates could go anywhere, they could transfer anywhere they applied, and they were highly respected. I was debate coach for several years there in that period.
Right.
We were junior college, but we were invited to senior college, and we quite frequently ripped to junior college and senior college and won high honors, first place in a wide category of speaking, eulogies, the usual things in public speaking. And Mars Hill did a great job. I was totally unaware of what we were doing. I thought it was just routine, but that's the way it worked out. But that was Dr. Blackwell's era. And then when Bentley came in, we were just beginning, of course, as a senior
college.
We never have reached the status as a senior college as we had as a junior. And I regret that. I had high hopes, but the competition is much greater.
Right.
We're surrounded by state colleges. We're surrounded by universities, and it's a rough go for a small private school to make nationwide and be ranked anywhere in there. Yeah.
I've heard that said before, that the status or the level of respect for Mars Hill as a junior college did not translate as easily going to the senior level.
No, it did not, and we regretted that. We labored individually as faculty members to do our utmost best, but it didn't ring any bells outside the circles.
Right. Everywhere I've heard when students left here and they'd go, say, for example, to Wake Forest, and the professors there would see, oh, he came from Mars Hill, he's fine, he'll be fine. And they were given a sort of a pass to know that they were not having to work as hard maybe as somebody else because they already had a really fine education.
They came to us willing and able, and we sent them out even more willing and more able.
Right. Let me ask you, you mentioned the debate. One of the things that's been fascinating to me in studying Mars Hill College's history is in 1891, 90, 91, 92, John White and Thomas Huffam, who were the leaders and movers and shakers in that day, formed the first literary societies here, and they based them on the societies at Wake Forest because they had been at Wake Forest. And of course, when you first came here, those societies were going strong. What happened to them that they went away? What happened?
See, Robert, one of the greatest losses for Mars Hill College was the loss of those societies. They were dynamic, they were influential, they were builders of character, but for whatever reason they died, they were dropped, and I've regretted it, deeply regretted it ever since. I watched the students in there, I watched their performance, I watched what a variety of experiences they had in the literary world.
Right.
But there's nothing, we have nothing on campus,
Nothing that equates it.
None of the fraternities and sororities come anywhere close to doing what that society did. Yeah?
Right.
And they were dynamic, and they were absolutely influential all the way up.
I gathered that, and you and I talked earlier when I was doing research on Treasures about the debate teams and how John Huff was one of your prize debaters. I told him that later on. He was pleased to know that you had regarded him in that way. Was the debate team, it was not a part of the academic program, was it? They were like extracurricular things.
Extracurricular.
And did they come through the societies? Was that how that happened, or?
These societies were the opportunities to do the debating. You know,
okay.
Worked very well. But as a junior college, we should not even been invited, to the senior level. But the first year, we won enough that he kept inviting us back, and I was very well pleased. But what amazed me was how many categories we wound up with first place. Again, I said, I was too dumb to realize, hey, this is not usual.
How did you get interested? I mean, you have to learn to be a great debate coach. You got to know something. How did you learn all that?
Well, basically, I'm a newsman, as you well know, sir. I'm interested in what's going on in the world, and following the news, you have to be aware. Hey, this, and that. My first public speaking was done in Sunday school class up at Appalachian State.
Right.
And my last is going to be right here, I think.
Oh my! I always enjoy when you get up and do scriptures in church on Sunday, because I know we can hear for one thing, and also there's going to be some aliveness in those scriptures. That's a great tradition, the debate tradition, and you're right. There's not something that has not endured, and nor is there any seeming interest in it.
Which is a loss.
Well, I thought about it as I was thinking about it earlier, that maybe what killed it off was going to the senior college, but maybe what really killed it off was automobiles, because people didn't stay here on the weekends, to have those Friday evening things. That's right. They left. That went away. We were talking earlier about the Jolley family being in exotic places under unusual circumstances. I remember in 1989, the campus was horrified to learn that your wife and Jim Lindbergh and that group of Mars Hill people were in Tiananmen Square.
Yes.
When we were looking on the news and seeing this tank, and this young man, was standing in front of it.
Mars Hill right in the middle of it.
Right in the middle of it. Tell me about that. When did you first hear about that problem?
Again, this was on the TV, as you remember. So
yes.
That was standard. And we were trying to find out where in the world, where's Betty? We couldn't find out anything.
Right.
And finally it wound up that Stewart connected somebody with the State Department, and they told him where she was, that she was safe. And next thing I know, she's flying to Asheville, returning home. Thank goodness.
Goodness. So she was able then, they were able to get those folks out very quickly.
And when she got to Asheville in the airport, the first thing she did, reach over and kiss the ground. Home.
Like the Pope.
Right.
Like the Pope.
Absolutely.
Well, I remember being so relieved. Everybody was so upset here, not knowing what sort of response the Chinese might have, you know.
It could go anyway.
Anyway, and I was telling you, watching the Olympic Games right now in Tiananmen, you know, seeing Tiananmen Square again, it's a whole different thing, isn't it? It's a very, very different world. We haven't talked about your writing, and I'm not going to talk about that a great deal because there's another interview planned for you to talk about your writing. How soon in your work as a teacher did you realize that you wanted to be a writer as well?
That came later. As you remember, as a college teacher, you had 9 months of employment and 3 months, Lord help you. Lord help you didn't pay any bills. So I read in the U.S. News, World Report, 1958, that the National Park Service is looking for historians. So I applied to the National Park Service and wound up as an employee, a seasonal ranger for the Bush Parkway. Wound up in Virginia, up in Waynesboro, Virginia, stationed at a place called Humpback Rocks, milepost, good gosh, 5.8 on the Parkway. Had a marvelous, marvelous summer. And then each summer I went back to the Parkway. And more, I wanted to go to school, finish my education. And I said, okay, I did an article for the Tar Heel magazine and did it on the Red Hand in Dixie, the Gastonia strike of the 1930s. And I said, I'll do that for my dissertation. They said, don't look that bore everybody to do the Parkway. So I decided to do the Parkway as a dissertation, and that's where I began.
And that's where it began.
Oh, yeah.
What a wonderful way to be led into it.
Right.
You were right there.
Right there, and had, entree to places I don't think the average writer had entree to.
Absolutely. How long were you doing the ranger service? How many years did you do that?
25 years.
25? My goodness.
See, Robert, some of the most enjoyable times of my life.
I'm sure.
I miss the classroom, you can well read.
Right.
But I miss even more those campfire services. And see, here's the campfire, and those eyes are lighting up, and oh, what a feeling.
Yes.
What a feeling. I miss that.
I'm sure.
I miss that.
You were talking to me the other day about the Parkway and the fact that it didn't finish, it didn't end. It was to go on farther south than it did. Is there any plan afoot to take it where it was supposed to be done in the 1930s? Will that ever happen?
The idea when Senator Byrd and others spoke to FDR about the possibility, he said, from Virginia into North Carolina is great, but why not begin up in Vermont and run all the way to Georgia? It never got off the ground.
No, okay.
In the 1960s, proposal to run it extended into Georgia, and all sorts of preparation were made for it, environmental impact studies, master plan studies, all this, and for 20 years it hung fire, and Georgia more and more flatly refused to approve it. In the end, it was rejected.
So because of Georgia was the one.
Georgia was the...
What was their reasoning for not wanting it to continue?
That's what I'm researching right now. I'm adding 3 new chapters to my Parkway story. One of them is the issue of tolls.
Right. 8
times Uncle Sam has tried to levy tolls to the Parkway. That'd be a good chapter. One about the 20-year struggle, 12-year struggle for route around grandfather, which wound up in Lincoln Valley.
Yes, oh yes.
Marvelous. And then the proposed extension of Georgia. And that's going to be a dilly. That's going to be a dilly. Because it's all sorts. I was amazed at the variety of protests. From a high school kid all the way up to great grandmother.
What was the rationale for the protest?
We don't need it.
Oh.
I-75 was in process of coming through Georgia, leveling everything, as you well believe. They said, we only have one ridge, we don't ruin that. We only got one Appalachian Trail, you ruin that. We don't want it. We don't want to win in that fashion.
And what a weird thing. You were talking about the tolls. I had never heard that until you mentioned it.
Most people haven't.
it would be, it would kill a lovely thing, it seems to me. Why? Is it because they want the money to help upkeep?
Oh, it's tolls are standard. You're in a national park, you
Right.
have a fee to pay.
Right.
The Skyline Drive, which pioneered that thing, you're on the Skyline Drive, you pay a fee to go in.
Right.
But the extension from Skyline Drive to the Great Smokies was done with the idea, when it was first proposed, North Carolina said, we're interested, but if it's tolled, we're not interested. It was arranged through the federal government that we have a program whereby we can do the extension and make the parkway without being tolled, provided if the states will buy the land, Virginia and North Carolina will buy the land, donate it to the federal government will take over, construct the highway and maintain it. So we'll do it. And somewhere, I'm not sure it was ever legalized, but more than a handshake. So 8 times plus, Uncle Sam has decided we'll put toll on the parkway.
Will it ever happen?
It'll come up against here. I think in the end the solution is going to be this, that those with license tag from Virginia and North Carolina will be toll free. Other tolls will. That's what I think will eventually happen.
Would that be an acceptable compromise to that problem, you think? But it's going to cost a fortune, because then you'll have to have toll booths.
It's ridiculous, Robert, to have 649 miles of road and every little junction have a toll booth.
Yes. That's.
I think they had 21 stations designed. But
Good.
You won't believe this. They had stations put up, had men in uniform at the door ready to take fees. North Carolina said don't. And we're successful.
Goodness gracious me.
I'm trying to tell that story.
Well, good. I'm so excited that you're going to do an update of your book called The Blue Ridge Parkway, which is the sort of classic standard book for the whole parkway. There'll be another lecture, an interview talking about that book. Let me ask you. You mentioned it a while ago, the Civilian Conservation Corps, and you were a part of that in the late '30s. Tell me about you. How did you get into the CCC? How did that work?
It was part of Uncle Sam's relief program. Each state had relief agencies, and the relief agency, when FDR put up the program, says, okay, I want relief agencies to do recruiting for me. I want Army to take over and uniform the boys, feed them, discipline, and so forth. And I want the Interior Department and the Agriculture Department to provide jobs. That was the setup.
Right.
And each state then was allotted a number of enrollees based upon the total population for the state. And each relief agency said, okay, we have X number, we have a quota. Each county would assign a quota. And you could apply, or somebody could recommend you. I think somebody recommended me, and I would accept it, and wound up putting a camp, a soil conservation camp in Lexington, North Carolina. And out there planting pines by the hundreds of thousands.
Oh, I know. I remember as a child seeing rows and rows of pines, and there'd be a sign out there that said, prepared by the CCC. Right. Did you have to be a certain age to be in there?
I think 18 to begin with, and the final reduced to 17.
Okay. So this clearly was a work projects thing by the government to help keep people.
It was designed as a relief program.
As a relief program.
It was also designed to do two things: to help the land,
right.
help the man.
Yes.
Great, it did both.
And your new book, we'll talk about that new book another time later, is wonderful about the CCC. I was so pleased you did that, because I'm one who grew up knowing about it, but there's so many people in the current generation who never even heard of that.
We had a camp up here, as you know.
Right here.
Right here. A camp, first of all, for young enrollees. And when Hoover was president, you remember when the veteran of World War I made a march on Washington asking for early payment of something due to them, and Hoover sick to MacArthur and patted on them and drove them out of Washington. Well, Mr. FDR says, fellas, I'll establish camps for you. And you better believe he established those camps. So we had, first of all, a junior camp, and they named their camp in honor of the slave here on campus, Camp Joe.
Camp Joe. Where was it physically here in town?
Do you know where the Emeritus daycare center is?
Yes.
The third house down, there are about 5 houses sitting on the side right there.
And it was physically right there. So it was here in town.
But when the veterans moved in, they quickly dropped the name Old Joe and named it Camp Robert E. Lee.
Robert E. Lee.
Yes.
How long did the CCC program last?
Began in 33, ended very shortly after Pearl Harbor, ended in July 42.
I guess the war ended it by virtue of there was
war
no
was an automatic death.
Yeah, right. Everybody had to go fight in the war. There was
no question about that.
There was no question about that. As you were writing, did you find? I know you continued to teach until what, 91? Did you find that your writing, were you having to do it in summers, or were you able to take a course or term off here and there and do writing, or was it always?
It was a sandwich in between. Right. Get my lecture notes together, get the classroom ready, and then any spare time I can go ahead and do some review or some search on, well, whether it's Parkway or the CCC, whatever it is.
Right.
And the CCC was very extended, long time.
What I know you're going to do an update of your Blue Ridge Parkway book, but what projects have you out there that you're very excited about for the future? Have you got other projects you want to do as a writer?
When I finish this revision of the Parkway, the Woody chair is giving me a rocking chair.
Yes.
As part of my retirement program, and I'm going to sit in a rocking chair.
Oh, good for you. You know, I told Dr. Lunsford I was so disappointed that he gave his collection of papers to UNCA. I thought they really should have come to Mars Hill. He made wonderful things, didn't he?
Yeah.
Well, you know,
he was a World War veteran. He and I are the same age, have many memories of World War II.
Right.
And we're hoping to be able maybe to go together and visit our service over there in World War II.
Yes, why not? That would be great. Fascinating man. You were here all these years since the late 40s. You spent a whole lifetime in Mars Hill. What do you think the college brought to you in the way of enriching your life? What did it do for you?
I received repeated offers to go to other universities and teach. Offered to go back to Appalachian, offered to go to the University of Tennessee and so forth. I told Betty, I said, no, wait. We'll get an offer to go to Honolulu and we'll go. Well, the offer came as an Army historian. I evaluated it, and for my two boys, I said, no, let them finish school here. Mars Hill's a great community for the boys grew up in. So I turned it down. I haven't regretted it one bit.
Haven't regretted it a bit.
Not one bit.
It was a great place to bring up families. I've heard that.
As you know, I could have gone anywhere I wanted to, basically. But my two boys, they got good community relationships and good education here.
And Stuart is still here.
Oh yes, he's still
and
here.
probably won't leave.
Well, I have no intention.
I think that's great. If it brought that to you, what do you think is your legacy to the college?
I suspect stories about standing on top of tables.
You've heard that a lot too, haven't you?
I've heard that.
There were, when people talk about you, they always talk about, in the most charming and gentle way, they always talk about upbeatness, you know, that you were a person who was positive and energetic and made them think, particularly students, made them think and made them look at things in a different way. How would you assess yourself as a teacher? You said you had a mentor. How did you take what he gave you and turn it into something that was totally yours?
I think it all comes back to that mentor. It's such a dynamic personality and so forceful and so able and so dynamic. Just to be able to follow in his footsteps, what was a joy for me, but to realize, hey, your mentor, bless his heart, driving home from a basketball game, skidded on ice, is now dead. Now what do? Perpetuate his memory by improving on his teaching.
And that's what you did. And that's what you did. And when students come back to visit you and to talk to you, what are the kinds of things they say?
Do you remember?
Do you remember?
Do you remember? Yeah.
And then you, mostly, I'm sure you do remember, don't you?
I I've been blessed in so many ways. But many of my students became famous in their own right, you know, most of my debaters did exceedingly
well.
Steve Blackman was one of my debaters, for example. You know.
Yes.
Others out there becoming medical doctors, becoming this and that, lawyers and whatnot, and I'm highly pleased with the results. But when I look across the board, I told Betty, you don't have to worry about me much. I have to be aware of what I do wherever I am, because wherever I am, Mars Hill students there too. She stepped off the airplane in Shannon, Ireland. Miss Jolley, what are you doing here? So I have to be here.
So you're international. The Jolleys are international. Betty was also an incredible human being, and I enjoyed her very, very much. Let me ask you one final question. People talk about it, and nobody seems to have come up with an answer that's definitive. What do you think is this thing that seems to permeate Mars Hill? People are always saying there's something here. What is it?
Part of it goes back to those societies. It was a different social link than ordinary colleges have.
Right.
And we built on that. Part of it goes back to the fact that our faculty as a rule were very conscious of their role as faculty, and were very conscious there's those students in that seat out there who paid their bill, and we had therefore to be conscious of doing a first-class job.
Right.
And I think if we check back over the years, we've done a pretty good job of
first-class job. So, if I hear you, you are saying that much of it had to do with quality and expert teaching, so that students picked up on that, and it was sort of like it fed back on itself. There was an energy that came out of fine teaching.
A mutual respect.
And mutual respect.
When I would have my orientation for my first classes, my comment always to them was, I promise you one thing and one thing only. When I come to you, I will come with my best, or otherwise I won't come.
And you did.
And then one little girl, bless her heart, one student says, Mr. Jolley, I have a bone to pick with you. What kind of, she said, you may not be aware, but I am, that you wink at her, but you don't wink at me. I said, I forgot to tell you, I have a wink that's automatic. So I never have any control of it. So that's the way it is. That's the way it is.
What a fun way to end, Harley. Thank you so much. It was a great pleasure. Thank you, sir. Thank you.